The sound was horrific, a wet crunch like a thick branch snapping under the weight of snow. 300 soldiers on the drill ground at Fort Stonehill shuddered simultaneously, some instinctively turning away. Major Victor Hardington, a massive man with a jaw like a battering ram, released Chief Warrant Officer Eleanor Raychester's left arm. Her elbow was already beginning to swell, the tendon was torn, the pain pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She didn't scream. She didn't even make a sound. Her dark brown eyes met his light blue ones, and there was no anger or accusation in that gaze, only cold, absolute knowledge. She turned with quiet dignity and headed toward the medical station, clutching her injured arm to her body. The crowd parted before her in complete silence. Her silence was louder than any scream. Major Hardington tried to laugh it off, addressing the stunned ranks. See, the correct use of force produces results. Nobody laughed. 12 hours earlier, the Texas sun hung over the base's main training field like a hot metal disc. It was 14:30, the scorching heat of the day. 300 soldiers stood in a horseshoe formation, their camouflage darkened by sweat. They listened to Major Hardington, an officer whose reputation for combat aggression was rivaled only by the base's peaceful arrogance. The modern battlefield isn't a computer game, he thundered, pacing in front of the formation. You won't always have a rifle. Sometimes it all comes down to this. He clenched his massive fists, showing them to the crowd. Bone against bone, will against will, man against man. His gaze swept the ranks, searching for the perfect volunteer for the demonstration. Seasoned infantrymen, young lieutenants, experienced sergeants. He passed them all. His gaze settled on a figure in the shadows beneath a single tree at the edge of the parade ground. Chief Warrant Officer Eleanor Raychester, a signals intelligence specialist with the 83rd Cyber Operations Brigade. Of medium height, wiry build, with perfect posture and a neutral expression. She was a technician, someone who spent her days in the frigid depths of a secure building, where the temperature was kept at 16 degrees for the benefit of the servers, not the people. For Hardington, she embodied everything he despised, a keyboard warrior who waged war behind a computer. And worst of all, she was a woman in a world he considered a man's domain. You! He pointed a finger in her direction. Chief Warrant Officer, to the center, immediately! A low murmur rippled through the ranks. Everyone knew that the Raychester unit rarely participated in such demonstrations. They were ghosts, people from another world, whose work was secret and incomprehensible. Raychester showed no reaction. She simply moved toward the center with economical, precise steps until she stood before Hardington. 300 pairs of eyes watched her. She stood calmly, her arms hanging loosely at her sides, her weight evenly distributed. Her eyes met his without challenge, but also without submission. There was an emptiness of analytical observation in them. Hardington began circling her, giving the audience time to appreciate the contrast. He was a head taller, 30 kilos heavier. Visually, it seemed a disparity. What is your military specialty, Chief Warrant Officer? 255 Sierra, Major. Radio intelligence analysis. Hardington chuckled, the sound like scraping metal. So, you fight with a mouse and a comfortable chair. You sit in the air conditioning, sipping coffee, right? Several of the henchmen in the front row laughed. Raychester didn't flinch. My duties are technical in nature, Major. Technical in nature. He took a deep breath, as if the words caused physical discomfort. Here, in the real world, things get physical, rough, brutal. Let's see how your technical skills translate into reality. He gestured for her to stand in the center, where all 300 soldiers could watch without interference. We'll demonstrate a simple submission technique, a standing armbar. It's a matter of leverage, not strength. He winked at the crowd. So even our friends from the land of ones and zeros should understand this concept. Math is universal, isn't it? A chorus of laughter echoed through the ranks. Sergeant Major Torres, standing to one side, felt the tension in his jaw. He'd spent 32 years in the army and seen a lot, but this smelled less like a demonstration and more like something else. Hardington grabbed her left hand. His grip was too strong, his fingers digging into her skin. It was more than was necessary for the demonstration. Now, he addressed the audience, assuming the role of lecturer. The subject may resist. Your goal is to apply pressure to the elbow joint, forcing the opponent to submit. Pain is a great teacher. He began to twist her arm. It was supposed to be a slow, controlled movement. But Hardington wasn't demonstrating technique. He was asserting dominance. The pressure shifted from training to painful, then to the zone of actual injury. The angle became unnatural, anatomically incorrect. A collective sigh rolled through the crowd. Several soldiers in the back rows instinctively stepped forward, then stopped, unwilling to interfere with the senior officer's actions. This was no longer a training exercise. This was an attack, carried out in front of 300 witnesses. Reichester's face remained a mask of serene control, but her eyes were busy. She noted the precise angle of the sun, the position of the security cameras on the tall poles. Camera number 2, northeast corner, perfect view, no glare. She cataloged the faces in the front row. Sergeant Major Torres, his expression shifting from interest to disapproval. 2 Lieutenant Hardingtons, grinning idiotically. Captain Calloway of the Law Corps, his eyes wide with alarm, his hand reaching for his clipboard. She felt the ligaments in her elbow stretch to their limits. A sharp pain ran along the nerve endings. She mentally filed it away in a separate compartment of her consciousness. The pain was data, nothing more. Major, she said in an incredibly calm voice, this demonstration is over. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. Her lack of reaction, her absolute calm, enraged him more than any resistance. She refused to play the victim, and that was unbearable for him. It's over when I say it is, he growled, his face flushed, the veins bulging in his neck. He gave her hand one last vicious tug, pushing his full weight into it. How about this? Is it over enough? The crunch was nauseatingly audible even from a distance, the sound of tearing fabric. It sent shivers down many people's spines. The pain was white-hot, blinding, a blast of white light. But she didn't scream. Her body froze for a split second. Then she relaxed her shoulders. A conscious effort of will that required almost superhuman discipline. Struggle, resistance, satisfaction. She refused him completely. Sergeant Major Torres took a decisive step forward. Major, that's enough. Immediately. Hardington released her abruptly. His face went through several expressions in a second. Rage, shock, understanding of the consequences. He tried to laugh it off, turning back to the line. See? The correct use of force produces results. No one laughed. The silence was absolute. Even his constant accomplices fell silent, their smiles slowly fading. Reichester stood there, clutching her left arm to her body. She looked at her arm with clinical detachment, then looked up at Hardington. Their eyes met. There was no anger in her gaze, only emptiness, a cold, endless emptiness, and something else, knowledge. She knew something that made her dangerous. She didn't say a word. She turned and headed toward the medical station, her back straight, her head held high. The soldiers parted for her, some lowering their eyes. Her silence was louder than any accusation. The medical station was an oasis of coolness and antiseptic scents. Young Captain Jonathan Reeves, the physician's assistant, examined her hand with gentle, professional movements. His eyebrows slowly rose. Chief Warrant Officer, this is a severe second, possibly third-degree sprain. I suspect a partial ligament tear. Minimum 4 weeks of recovery, possibly physical therapy. He looked up at her face. How exactly did this happen? During a demonstration of hand-to-hand combat techniques, sir. Demonstrations? The captain's eyebrows rose. Chief Warrant Officer, this doesn't look like a training accident. It's more like excessive force or assault. I'll have to file this as a potential unsafe act report. That would be entirely appropriate, sir, Reichester said without hesitation. Indeed, I insist on your report being as detailed as possible. Captain Reeves nodded, pulling out a tablet. Please note the time of the incident, 14:32. Note the location, Training Area Number 4. In the presence of approximately 300 military personnel, and document my official statement that the force used was significantly excessive for the demonstration setting. The captain typed quickly, his expression growing darker with each word. He was creating a legal document, an official record, a piece of evidence. Rachester watched him type, checking the accuracy of every detail. She was doing what she did every day, collecting data, building a case. She was given a sling to support her elbow, a prescription for anti-inflammatory medication, and a medical certificate exempting her from all physical training for 4 weeks. She accepted the documents, carefully read each one, folded them neatly, and placed them in her right pocket. Each step was a deliberate act of building a case, brick by brick. From the medical center, she headed to her work area, a restricted access facility, a windowless concrete box colloquially known as the vault. From the outside, the building looked featureless, with a single reinforced door guarded by 2 armed guards and retinal scanners. Warning signs read, "Unauthorized access prohibited. Use of force authorized." Inside, the world of hot dust and bright sun vanished completely. It was replaced by the low hum of industrial servers, the chill of an air conditioner at 15 degrees, and the bluish glow of dozens of monitors displaying data streams from around the globe. Digital maps flickered, showing signal movements, spikes in activity, and patterns in enemy communications. This was her territory, her kingdom. Here, she was no petite woman in a world of brutal strength. She was a master of a different kind of power, more subtle, but no less deadly. The power of logic, mathematics, and patterns. Here, body size didn't matter. What mattered was the size of one's intellect. She sat down at her terminal, her right hand confidently moving across the keyboard at a rate of 120 words per minute, her left resting in a sling, throbbing with a dull ache. She ignored it, pushing it to the back of her mind. She accessed the base's security network, a system she'd helped design 3 years ago. She knew every node, every camera, every vulnerability. She accessed the video surveillance archives for Training Area Number 4. She entered the timestamp, 2:32 p.m. 3 video files appeared. She selected camera number 2, the northeast position, the one she'd noted during the incident. She opened the file. The video began playing in high definition. She watched the incident unfold in cold, digital clarity. There was no emotion in the way she watched. It was analysis. There was Hardington, smug, pacing the front of the line. There she was, calm. There was the grab. There was the twisting, slow, merciless. The camera captured the unnatural angle of her arm with mathematical precision. There was the collective shudder of the crowd. There was the tension in Sergeant Major Torres's jaw. There was Captain Calloway's shock. There were the lieutenant's gloating smiles, and the sound. The camera was equipped with a high-quality microphone. She heard a crunching sound, sickeningly clear. The camera, an impartial mechanical witness, recorded everything. She downloaded the file, 23 minutes of recording, starting 5 minutes before the incident. She applied military-grade encryption, created a checksum, documented the chain of custody, and stored it on 3 separate secure servers, 1 local, 2 remote. A chain of custody of evidence that cannot be challenged. Then she opened a fresh document. An official military memorandum for the record, AR-15-6 format. She typed with one hand, her speed dropping to 70 words per minute, but her accuracy remained 100%. She described the event in detail, from a purely factual perspective. Time, location, GPS coordinates, officers present, number of witnesses, weather. Then the sequence of events. The major's command, her exit, questions, answers, capture, pressure, her order to stop, continued pressure, the sound of injury, Torres's intervention, the end. No value judgments, just facts. Cold, verifiable, irrefutable. She then cited the specific articles of the Uniform Military Code that had been violated. Article 93. Cruelty and inhuman treatment. Article 128, assault. Article 133, disobedience. She attached Captain Reeves's medical report and an encrypted video file with metadata. She saved the entire package in a digital folder with a red indicator. Ready for delivery, awaiting trigger. She didn't send it. Not yet. The system requires proper sequencing. A premature report could be dismissed as an emotional reaction. It was necessary to wait for the enemy's next move. One incident is an accident. Two incidents are a pattern. A pattern is proof. With the documentation completed, she turned to her real work. On the holographic display above the console, a complex three-dimensional web of signals flickered over a map of Eastern Europe. An integrated air defense system for a potential enemy. A puzzle of hundreds of frequencies, polymorphic encryption, and spoofed emissions. For the next 3 hours, she immersed herself in it with absolute concentration. Her mind, a finely tuned pattern recognition instrument, sifted through the digital noise, finding subtle harmonies in apparent chaos, hidden rhythms in random spikes, mathematical regularities in pseudo-random sequences. She mapped the enemy network's command links, identified primary, secondary, and backup nodes, and calculated their coordinates down to the meter. She discovered a critical vulnerability in their frequency-hopping protocol. An algorithm with insufficient entropy, the sequence could be predicted. It was an act of intense, almost meditative concentration, an intellectual battle of the highest order, a duel of minds across thousands of kilometers. It was a ritual that purified the emotional chaos of the day, washed away the humiliation and pain, replacing them with the pure mathematical beauty of a solved problem. It was her power, a real, meaningful, deadly power that Major Hardington had no idea about. And it was wonderful. 2 days later, the second impulse arrived exactly as she predicted. Human behavior, especially in people with excessive egos and lacking self-control, was remarkably predictable. She was in the base's mess hall, a massive 500-seat room. She methodically devoured her meal with one hand, her left still in a sling. Major Hardington entered through the main door, accompanied by his lieutenants, Mills and Garcia. They strode through the hall with undeserved confidence, their boots clopping loudly. They spotted her, sitting alone by the window, and changed course. "Well, well, look who's here," Hardington announced to the entire room, his voice quite loud. "That's our keyboard warrior. How's your hand, Chief Warrant Officer? Got an injury from all that typing? I've heard that kind of injury is pretty serious in the office world." Mills and Garcia chuckled obediently. Several nearby tables fell silent, and soldiers turned their heads. Raychester didn't look up from her plate. She continued eating, taking slow bites, chewing thoroughly, then another. Her rhythm didn't change for a second. Her lack of engagement was a sharp refusal to play his game. "I heard you went to whine to the medics," Hardington continued, leaning over her desk, invading her space. "Wrote a little report. Complained. In a real army, we resolve matters face to face, like men. We don't hide behind papers." He was creating evidence without realizing it. More witnesses, more public statements. Raychester mentally registered the information. "Major," she said in a quiet but firm voice without looking at him, "I'm trying to have lunch." "Is this insubordination I hear?" Lieutenant Mills interjected. "You should show the Major some respect." Raychester finally slowly raised her head. She looked not at them, but past them. Her gaze swept the room methodically. She noted faces, ranks, exit locations, staff positions. She glanced at the security camera on the wall near the food service counter, noted the angle, assessed what it was capturing. Then her eyes returned to Hardington. They were cold, flat, analytical. "This conversation has no productive purpose." She picked up the tray with one hand, stood up smoothly, and prepared to leave. Hardington stepped in her way, physically blocking the exit. "We're not finished yet, Chief Warrant Officer." His voice grew quieter, more menacing. "I've filed my own formal report about your insubordination, your incompetence, about how you disrupted my demonstration. By the time this process is over, this little bandage will be the least of your problems. I'll make sure you're back where you came from, behind the keyboard, where you belong." It was a direct threat, uttered in front of witnesses, and an admission of retaliatory action. This was the trigger. She now had the initial attack, medical documentation, video evidence, and now a public threat. The pattern was complete. The conditions for an official response were met. She said nothing. She simply stepped aside, walked around him like water flows around a stone, handed over the tray, and left the dining room with a calm gait, her back straight, her head held high. Her calm was a fortress he couldn't breach. He remained standing in the center of the now silent hall, seething with impotent rage, the winner of a battle in which no one took part. He mistook her restraint for capitulation, her silence for weakness, her withdrawal for defeat. It was a deep, fundamental, and very quickly public miscalculation. The final confrontation occurred that evening, as dusk descended on the base, painting the sky in dramatic shades of orange and purple. Rochester was returning to the warehouse along one of the secondary paths that crisscrossed the base, a route most soldiers avoided in favor of the illuminated main roads. She walked calmly, her left arm in a sling, her right hanging freely by her side. Her steps were even, mechanically correct. They waited for her at a bend where the path passed between two old warehouse buildings, creating a narrow corridor of shadows. 3 men emerged from the darkness, blocking the path. Major Hardington in the center, Lieutenants Mills and Garcia on either side. In the light of the setting sun, their silhouettes appeared massive and menacing. Rochester stopped 3 meters away from them, not even flinching. She simply stood there, assessing the situation with an analytical eye. "Evening stroll, Chief Warrant Officer?" Hardington stepped forward. "A dangerous time for strolling. Do you know how easy it is to fall and get hurt in the dark?" Mills and Garcia parted ways, beginning to surround her. Classic intimidation tactics. Numbers, isolation, physical dominance. They were bigger, stronger, 3 of them against her, a wounded woman. By all normal calculations, this shouldn't have been a battle. It should have been a massacre. "Major," said Rochester in a low voice, "you are making a mistake." "The only mistake I made," Hardington growled, "was being too soft 2 days ago. But mistakes can be corrected." He took another step forward, his massive hands clenching into fists. Rochester did something unexpected. She shifted her weight back, adopting a low, balanced stance, feet shoulder-width apart, center of gravity lowered, right hand raised in front of her face. It was the fighting stance of someone who knew what she was doing. "This is your last warning," she said. "Step back." Hardington laughed, the sound harsh and angry. "Or what? You'll print me a threatening letter?" He lunged forward, his right hand reaching out to grab her by the neck. A rough, aggressive move from a man accustomed to using size and strength to dominate. What happened next took exactly 7 seconds. Rochester shifted, her body moving with such speed and precision that it seemed a blur. She didn't back away from his attack. She drove into it, closing the gap rather than creating it. Her right hand rose, meeting his wrist from the outside, redirecting the momentum of his attack past its target. Simultaneously, her left knee, the injured side he considered a weakness, shot up with brutal force, slamming into his solar plexus. The air left Hardington in a loud exhalation. His eyes widened in shock. He began to double over. She didn't give him time to recover. Her right elbow came down like a hammer, slamming into the base of his skull, right where his spine met his head. Hardington collapsed to his knees, then fell face first into the dust. He didn't try to get up. He just lay there, groaning and trying to remember how to breathe. Lieutenant Mills, stunned by the suddenness and brutality, nevertheless rushed forward. He was young, full of fury, but untrained in anything beyond the basics. He swung a wide right hook, a move that could be telegraphed from a mile away. Rochester ducked under the blow, her body dropping almost to a crouch. His fist passed through empty air. Just as his momentum threw him off balance, she straightened, her right leg lashing out in a sideways kick, slamming into the side of his knee. Ligaments weren't designed to bend that way. Something snapped. Mills screamed and collapsed, clutching his ruined knee. Garcia, having seen 2 of his comrades neutralized in seconds, hesitated. His instincts for self-preservation warred with loyalty and ego. Ego won. He tried to grab her from behind, wrap his arms around her, using his weight to subdue her. It was a fundamental mistake. Rochester allowed him to approach, then jerked her head back. The back of her head connected with his nose with the crunch of shattering cartilage. Blood sprayed. His grip weakened with pain and shock. She twisted out of his arms, turned to face him, and delivered a swift, palm-up blow to the base of his chin. His head snapped back, his eyes rolling back in his head. He fell backward, landing hard on his back, dazed and disoriented. She stood over the 3 fallen men, her breathing only slightly rapid, controlled. Her wounded arm was still in a bandage, untouched. She hadn't even used it. Her uniform was dusty, her hair slightly disheveled, but otherwise, she looked perfectly calm. She looked up. Her eyes found a security camera mounted on the corner of a nearby warehouse. She looked directly into the lens, her expression neutral, almost indifferent. She held that gaze for 5 full seconds, allowing the camera to capture her face, her composure, her absolute control over the situation. Then she turned and calmly continued her way toward the vault, leaving the 3 men writhing in the dust behind her. Her steps were even, mechanically correct, the same as they had been before the confrontation. The next 48 hours at Fort Stonehill were spent in a whirlwind of investigations, interrogations, and mounting shock that spread through the Army hierarchy like wildfire. Major Hardington, Lieutenants Mills and Garcia were found by a patrol 20 minutes after the incident, still lying on the trail, still not fully recovered. Mills required medical evacuation for a knee, Garcia for a broken nose and a possible concussion. Hardington refused medical attention, which in itself was a sign that he was beginning to understand the depths of his troubles. Their initial version of the story was predictable. They claimed they were the victims of an unprovoked attack, that Raychester had attacked them without cause, that they were simply walking and bumped into her, that it had all been self-defense on her part that had turned into aggression. The story lasted exactly 3 hours, until Captain Sheila Martinez, the base's security chief, reviewed the security footage. Her office was in the administration building, a room filled with monitors, hard drives, and surveillance equipment. She sat at the console, reviewing time-stamped files. First, she found video of the ambush. A camera on the corner of the warehouse captured everything in cold clarity. The 3 men waiting in the shadows, Raychester walking along the path, their exit blocking her path, Hardington's aggressive body language, his verbal threats, then his attack. Then she witnessed what Captain Martinez, a professional with 20 years of experience, later described to colleagues as the most precise demonstration of defensive combat I've ever seen. 7 seconds of absolute mastery, 3 downed attackers, not a single wasted movement, not a single wasted energy. And then a final look into the camera. Calm, controlled, almost polite, as if she were saying, "I know you see this. I want you to see this. This is the truth." Captain Martinez printed out the video and immediately went to see Colonel David Stratton, the base commander. She entered his office unannounced, her expression grim. "Sir, you need to see this. Immediately." Colonel Stratton, a 52-year-old man with graying hair and a face shaped by years of command into a map of controlled stress, picked up the tablet. He watched the video in silence. Then he watched it again. Then he closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Tell me what we have." Captain Martinez opened the folder she had brought. "We have 3 separate incidents in the last 5 days, sir. First, Major Hardington publicly assaulted Chief Warrant Officer Raychester during a training demonstration, resulting in serious injury. This was captured on camera by 300 witnesses, including Sergeant Major Torres and Captain Calloway of JAG. Medical records confirm the severity of the injury and the use of excessive force. Go on. The colonel now looked as if he would rather face the enemy battery than listen to the rest. Second, public intimidation and threats in the base's mess hall 2 days later, also captured on camera by multiple witnesses. Hardington openly threatened to ruin Raychester's career. And the third? Last night, 3 men, Hardington, Mills, and Garcia, arrested a woman with an injured hand on an isolated trail. Fully documented. Hardington, the aggressor. Raychester, the defense. Her actions fully meet the parameters of legitimate self-defense under the ROE. She paused, then added more quietly. "Sir, She neutralized 3 attackers in 7 seconds using one hand. I've watched the footage 12 times. This wasn't a street fight. This was surgery. Professional, precise, controlled. She could have killed any of them at any moment. She chose not to. Every blow was calculated to incapacitate, not cause permanent damage. Colonel Stratton was silent for a long time, looking out the window at the base he had commanded for the past 3 years. What do we know about Chief Warrant Officer Raychester? I mean, really? Captain Martinez opened the second file. Eleanor Raychester, 34 years old, 12 years of service, Signals Intelligence Specialist, Extraordinary Class, TS, SCI clearance. 3 combat deployments: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Multiple meritorious awards, all classified. Impeccable service record. She paused. And sir, there's a training notation in her file that I initially missed. She completed a 3-month SEER course: Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape. An advanced program designed for special operations. Also, SOCOM's CQC course, Close Quarters Combat. She's more than just a technician, sir. She's trained for operations behind enemy lines. Why wasn't this information in her standard file? Because her unit, the 83rd Cyber Operations Brigade, is classified as non-military. They wear uniforms, but their work is considered technical support. Most people don't know that some of them are trained to deploy into the field, embedded with combat units to gather real-time intelligence. Martinez looked at the colonel. Sir, she's not the keyboard warrior everyone thinks she is. She's an operative who works at the intersection of war and technology. The colonel stood, walked over to the window, and looked out at the base. Somewhere out there, in the windowless concrete warehouse, sat the woman who had just changed his entire understanding of his people. Gather all the documentation. I want a full investigation under Section 15-6. Put Captain Calloway in charge. He witnessed the first incident. He's a lawyer. He's objective. He turned to Martinez. And find Sergeant Major Torres. I need to talk to him. He was there during the first incident. His testimony is critical. An hour later, Sergeant Major Daniel Torres sat in the colonel's office. He was a man with 32 years of service, 2 wars, and 4 commanders. His face was a map of experience, the scars and wrinkles telling stories he never spoke. Sergeant Major, the colonel began, I need your honest assessment of what happened on that training ground 5 days ago. Torres did not hesitate. It was an assault, sir, pure and simple. Major Hardington specifically singled out Chief Warrant Officer Raychester for public humiliation. He used force far in excess of what was necessary for the demonstration. I saw his face. He enjoyed it. He relished her pain. It was no mistake, sir. It was deliberate harm. The colonel nodded slowly. What do you know about the most senior warrant officer, Raychester? Torres's face changed. Something akin to respect appeared, mixed with something else. Memory, perhaps, or old gratitude. Sir, he began quietly, most people at this base see her as a technician, a person behind a computer. They don't know who she really is. He took a deep breath. 8 years ago, I served in Afghanistan, commanding a company in a battalion that was carrying out a clearing operation in the Kunar Valley. Major Hardington was there too, commanding another unit. We were to enter the valley early in the morning, pass through 3 villages, and search for weapons and militants. He paused, his eyes looking through the wall, seeing not the office, but a dusty Afghan valley bathed in early sunshine. 2 hours before the operation began, we were stopped. The order came from Brigade Command to immediately change the route. An intelligence analyst discovered that the enemy knew about our plan. They had set up ambushes along the entire original route. Roadside bombs, snipers on the heights, an entire company of fighters waiting in fortified positions. If we had gone according to plan, we would have been blown to pieces. The entire battalion, 300 men. The colonel leaned forward. Was that analyst Raychester? Yes, sir. She worked in a cold computer room somewhere on base, hundreds of kilometers away. She monitored enemy communications, intercepted their radio transmissions, cracked their codes. The night before the operation, she detected a surge in activity. The enemy was transmitting coordinates, instructions, confirmation of an ambush. She realized they knew. She calculated the exact location of every ambush element, plotted them on a map, and relayed the information to command, demanding immediate action. Torres looked directly at the colonel. Her data was so accurate that we called in airstrikes directly on those positions. The drones struck an hour before dawn. When we entered the valley on a rerouted route, we found only wreckage. She saved 300 lives that night, sir. Including mine, including Major Hardington's life. A silence fell over the office, heavy and meaningful. Does he know about this? The colonel finally asked. I don't think so, sir. It was a brigade-level operation. The details were classified. Most of the soldiers knew only that the route was changed at the last minute. They didn't know why. They didn't know who saved them. Torres chuckled humorlessly. The irony is that the man he just publicly beat up is the reason he's even alive to do it. Colonel Stratton closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, his decision made. Thank you, Sergeant Major. Your testimony will be included in the official investigation. You may go. When Torres left, the colonel sat in the silence of his office, staring at the documents before him. Through the window, he could see the warehouse, a faceless concrete building where the woman everyone had underestimated continued her invisible work, protecting people who didn't even know her name. He picked up the phone and dialed the extension. Captain Calloway, this is Colonel Stratton. Investigation Section 15-6 is officially open. You have 72 hours. I want the full report on my desk. And Captain, don't let anyone interfere with you. This is critical. The investigation took exactly 68 hours. Captain Andrew Calloway, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for ruthless legal precision, spent those hours interviewing witnesses, reviewing videotapes, poring over medical reports and Army regulations. He built a case with the same methodical precision with which Rochester analyzed enemy signals. His final report was an 83-page document, every statement supported by evidence, every conclusion inescapable and irrefutable. The findings were devastating. Major Victor Hardington was found guilty of 3 separate violations of the Uniform Code of Military Practice: brutality against a subordinate, assault, and attempted intimidation of a witness. The punishment was severe: demotion to captain, a fine, and immediate removal from command with transfer to an administrative position with no contact with personnel. His career, one he had built over 20 years, was over. One act of arrogance, one moment of uncontrolled ego, had destroyed everything. Lieutenants Mills and Garcia received more lenient but still devastating punishments: demotion to private, 30 days of base restriction, and conditional discharges from the military. One more incident, one mistake, and they would be dishonorably discharged. The formal announcement was made at the base's morning parade, as over 1,000 soldiers stood in formation. Colonel Stratton personally read the verdict, his voice amplified over loudspeakers, carrying throughout the base. His words were clear, unambiguous, and served as a warning to everyone present. This army does not tolerate abuse of power. This army does not protect those who use rank as an excuse for cruelty. Every soldier under my command, regardless of rank, specialty, or length of service, deserves respect and protection. Those who forget this will be held accountable. No exceptions. Hardington stood before the line, former major, now captain, his face ashen, his jaw clenched so tightly the muscles trembled. The colonel approached him, his movements formal, ritualistic. He removed the major's gold oak leaves from Hardington's collar and replaced them with 2 captain's silver bars. It was a public stripping of his status, a humiliation before the very people he had once bragged to. Then the colonel turned and pointed to a figure standing in the back row of the formation, almost invisible among the other soldiers. Chief Warrant Officer Rochester, stand down. She emerged, her steps even, her left arm still in a sling. She approached the colonel and stood at attention. Her expression was neutral, professional, without triumph, without satisfaction. Only calm acceptance. Chief Warrant Officer, the colonel said, his voice softer now but still loud enough for the entire base to hear. On behalf of this base, this command, and the United States Army, I apologize for what happened to you. What you experienced was unacceptable. Your professional conduct, your restraint, and your following the proper channels to resolve this matter exemplify what a soldier should be." He paused, then added more quietly, but the words still carried through. "We are also grateful for your service. Many here are unaware of the true nature of your work, the value you bring. Let me assure you, and everyone here, that your contribution to the safety of our service members has been and remains invaluable." 1,000 soldiers stood in silence, watching this moment. Many now looked at the petite woman with the bandage on her arm with completely different eyes. No longer a keyboard warrior, no longer just a technician, a legend they hadn't known, but were now beginning to understand. Raychester saluted, crisp and precise. "Thank you, sir. I was just doing my duty." The colonel returned the salute, then gestured for her to return to the ranks. She turned and walked back, calmly, without fuss. As she passed the ranks, the soldiers parted. But this time, it wasn't out of discomfort. It was out of respect. After formation, Raychester didn't go straight to the warehouse. She headed to a small cafe on the base grounds, a place where soldiers gathered for coffee before their shifts. She entered, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window, looking out over the base, bathed in the morning light. Sergeant Major Torres found her there. He sat down across from her without being invited, but she didn't object. There was a silence between them, comfortable, understanding. Finally, he spoke. 8 years, he said quietly. For 8 years, I've wanted to thank the man who saved my battalion that night in the Kunar Valley. I only knew it was a signals intelligence analyst, somewhere on base. Someone's name in a file, classified, inaccessible. I never knew it was you. Raychester looked at him, her dark brown eyes calm. It was my job, Sergeant Major. I did what I was trained to do. It was more than just a job. He pulled something from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. It was a challenge coin, a heavy metal disc the size of a dollar coin, bearing their battalion's emblem. Engraved on the back were the words, Kunar Valley, 2017, 300 lives saved. We made these after that operation. Every soldier in the battalion received one. We wear them as a reminder that someone's unseen work gave us another day to live. He pushed the coin towards her. You should have gotten one 8 years ago. Better late than never. Raychester took the coin, her fingers closing around the cold metal. For the first time in days, since the incident on the training ground, something changed in her expression. Not a smile. She was still too well controlled for that, but a slight softening around her eyes, barely noticeable, but real. Thank you, Sergeant Major. Call me Daniel. We survivors can afford to be informal. She nodded and pocketed the coin, next to the medical report she still carried. One document spoke of pain inflicted, the other of lives saved. The balance, as always, was complex and ambiguous. 3 weeks passed. Raychester's arm was healing well, physical therapy restoring her range of motion. The bandage became thinner, then disappeared completely. The bruise faded, turning into a yellow-green spot, then disappeared. The pain faded, becoming a faint memory, then nothing. Life at Fort Stonehill continued as usual. Soldiers trained, patrolled, and carried out missions. The sun still hung like a scorching disk over the Texas plain. Dust continued to rise in the wind. But something had changed, subtly, almost imperceptibly. When Raychester walked through the base, soldiers greeted her. Not out of obligation, but out of respect. Her unit, the 83rd Cyber Operations Brigade, were no longer ghosts on the fringes of military life. They were recognized for what they were, fighters on another front, no less important, no less dangerous. The story of what happened spread the way stories do in closed communities, in whispers, in exaggerations, in legends. A month later, new recruits arriving at the base heard about it during their first orientation. About the woman who knocked out 3 attackers in 7 seconds. About the equipment that turned out to be an operative. About the quiet professional who won the war without a single cry. One evening, as dusk tinted the sky with familiar shades of orange and purple, Colonel Stratton arrived at the vault. Security passed him through retinal scanners, and the massive door slid open with a mechanical hiss. He entered a cold, bluish world of servers and monitors. Raychester sat at her terminal, her hands moving across the keyboard with their usual speed. A new map, new signals, new puzzles awaiting solution flickered on the holographic display above her. She looked up, saw the colonel, and stood at attention. "At ease, Chief Warrant Officer." He stepped closer, staring at the array of data he could never understand. "I wanted to speak with you privately, not in an official setting. Sir, I want you to know," he chose his words carefully, "that I'm sorry. I'm sorry it took this for the people on this base to truly see you. I'm sorry you had to prove your worth through pain." Raychester looked at him with her dark brown eyes, calm, analytical. "Sir, with respect, I never had to prove anything. I always knew my worth. I knew what I was doing and why it was important. The opinions of others never defined me." The colonel nodded slowly, a small smile appearing on his face. "That's precisely why you're good at what you do. You don't need external validation. You find validation in the work itself. The work speaks for itself, sir. It always has." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Chief Warrant Officer, one more question. Just out of curiosity." He looked at her. "When you were standing on that parade ground, when he twisted your arm, what were you thinking at that moment?" She didn't hesitate. "I was thinking about the cameras, sir. About camera angles, witnesses, evidence. I was thinking about building a case." A pause, then a slight, barely perceptible change in her voice, something like quiet satisfaction. "I thought he was giving me everything I needed to destroy him. And I waited patiently for him to finish." Colonel Stratton laughed, the sound short but sincere. "The correction has been achieved." "Exactly so, sir." He saluted, she returned it, and he walked away, leaving her in her kingdom of cold and digital signals, where she was always at home. Raychester turned back to her terminal. A new map was loading on the screen before her, the Middle East this time, a complex network of enemy communications stretching across 3 countries. A puzzle waiting to be solved. Lives waiting to be saved. Her fingers touched the keyboard and began typing, quickly, precisely, confidently. The code appeared on the screen, line after line, each command precise, each algorithm beautiful in its logical elegance. This was her war. Invisible, silent, thankless most of the time, but real, deadly real. Somewhere out there, on the other side of the world, soldiers were preparing for an operation, unaware that in a cold room in Texas, a woman whose name they would never know was working to bring them home alive. She worked until late at night, as always. Hours passed unnoticed in a flood of data, patterns, and mathematical beauty. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, she solved the puzzle, found a vulnerability in the enemy network, compiled a report, and sent it via secure channels to those who would take action. Then she closed the terminal, stood up, and stretched. Her arm was functioning normally, its full range of motion restored. No scars on the outside. Inside, well, that was another matter. But she'd learned to live with invisible scars long ago, in other places, in other wars. She emerged from the warehouse into a warm, star-filled Texas night. The base was asleep. Only the duty patrol moved between the buildings, their silhouettes sharp against the starry sky. She walked along the same path where the ambush had taken place, now peaceful and moonlit. She stopped at the spot where it had happened, looking down at the ground where the 3 men lay defeated. No marks remained. Dust holds no traces. But the camera remembered. The files remembered. History remembered. And that was enough. She continued walking, calmly, without fear, under the starry sky, in the silence of the night. Her back was straight, her head was raised, her steps were even. Chief Warrant Officer Eleanor Raychester. Analyst. Operative. A legend most will never know. But she knew. And those saved by her invisible work, somewhere, somehow, continued to live, love, and dream, thanks to her. Correction achieved. Justice has been restored. The work continues.